Neil, obviously, particularly when a company is thinking about expanding, they start to think about beyond these shores, they start thinking about trading internationally, but it can also be risky. We get worried about not being paid, both for imports and exports. How can a bank help with that?
Well, I think the first thing is to understand the market. So if you're going to start operating overseas and looking at potentially selling or even just buying from overseas, then it's about getting over there and meeting with the suppliers, finding out who they might be, exploring the new markets. There's a lot that the bank can do, not only internally but through our network of advisors. I'd advocate UKTI and the Overseas Market Information Service, which is excellent for exploring new markets, so that you know who you're dealing with. And then it's about getting the right advisors around you to get the right commercial contract. And once you've got that in place and you know who you're dealing with, then you start looking at the payment terms and the cash flow. And obviously if you're selling overseas, then advance payment is fantastic. If you're buying from overseas, then open account is great. But if you can't get these things at the outset, which is often going to be the case, then you know, it's about looking at some of the traditional mechanisms that all the banks have got in place to help mitigate some of those risks, things like letters of credit, to control the risk. So if you're selling overseas, you're guaranteed that you're going to get paid, and if you're buying from overseas, you're guaranteed that you're going to get your goods. And all those things can be helped, can manage that risk and control the amount that you're borrowing at any one particular time.
And is there any sort of general rule of thumb about what a bank's attitude is going to be to somebody who comes and says, I'm thinking of going global? Does the bank tend to go, sounds a bit risky to me?
I think partly in answer to that, you would traditionally, with your bank, have a relationship manager for all of your day-to-day needs, but we've recognised how important it is to support those who are going global, and therefore I think you'll find with all the banks that there are then teams of specialist international managers there to support with all of the types of things that Neil's just mentioned. And I think just by that as an example, it's something we welcome. We know that our customers are going to need to go more global. The economy now is not just the UK, it's not just the Eurozone, it's beyond that. And therefore we're investing in, you know, specialist international managers to help with that kind of advice.
Because this is one of the problems, is that the government's constantly telling the business community, we've kept sterling low to help you, but it's very difficult for companies to feel confident enough to go beyond these shores. Well,
I think that's very true, but you know, when you're going to look at a new market, you know, some markets are just too big to ignore. You know, and if you want to get a piece of that market, then you really want to talk to the right people to get that understanding, because some of the margins that you can make, you know, in some of the overseas growth areas and developing economies are just fantastic. Obviously, you need to be aware of some of the you know, the tax issues and you know, all the import duty, the language barriers, and in some cases personal security and safety when you're travelling abroad and dealing with these new markets. But once you're in there, you know, and you've got that, you're confident with the people around you, then it can become very lucrative.
And it's related, but what would be the biggest dangers or mistakes that you've seen people make when they take this step?
Well, I think as confident as you can be with going into a new market, trusting people without having definite terms for payment. I've seen you know, offices set up abroad, staff employed locally, start working on contracts on a promise of payment, and it never comes. You know, and a simple letter of credit or you know, some sort of terms in the contract which will guarantee stage payments would alleviate some of these issues.
I think that's the point. We've got huge experience in the banks on how to help businesses export. I mean, I was speaking to a business in Liverpool a couple of weeks ago, and this business said, we used to export to Manchester and that was hard enough. And that sort of epitomises the challenges that small businesses have. You know, on their own market, it's hard enough.
Yeah.
Getting their debtors to pay them, hard enough. So if we go out and look out in Asia or the States, it's going to be that much harder. But we have huge experience within the bank, so please do come and talk to us and explain what you want to do, and then we can explain to you how you mitigate those risks, as you said.
Yeah.